Today, we, the web security team of Team BIOS, will be taking a session on Introduction to Web Security. So, in the session, we will be covering about fundamentals of web, client and server side, and important terminologies of web, then trivial web-based attacks. So, first, we are going to discuss about web architecture and how it works. So web is a client-server architecture. You can see that there will be a server on the other side and there will be a client. So server will be hosting the web pages. The client can request web pages through the internet. So here, suppose this is us, the client, and we will be sending a request to the web page that we wanted through the internet to the web server which is hosting the web page, and the server will respond with the web page that we wanted, and we will get back the web page into our computer. So this is how it works. We will be sending a request and server will be responding back with the web page. So the communication between the client and server is using a protocol called HTTP, which is Hypertext Transfer Protocol. So this is used for all communication through the web. So the web contents in the server is also known as hypertext. So that's why we call it as Hypertext Transfer Protocol. Next, we will be discussing how it works. So here you can see, suppose this is us with our computer, laptop, or any device which has a browser in it. So when we have to request a content to the web, we will be entering the URL in the browser, and then the browser will make a HTTP request to the web server, to the destination web server. So the web server will fetch the content for us and it will give back as the HTTP response to us, and the browser will render that response for us, and thus we can see the response in the browser. So this is how it works. So we can just see how that works. So this is a browser. We can enter google.com, and here you can see we will get the content of google.com. And if you inspect and go to the network tab, you can see that there it is sending a request to www.google.com, and we will get the response from the server. Here you can see the response. This is how that works. So let's get back to the slides. So we are next going to talk about what is server side, and the server side is the part where it is hosting the web page, and every client can request web pages or web contents from the server. So there will be a server side logic. So for writing the logic of the server, we need server side languages. So these are some of the examples for server side languages such as JavaScript, PHP, Ruby, Python. There are other frameworks also for that. These are some of the examples. So we can write the server side logic using this, and this will be like checking if you are logged in or not in the web application, if you are from where the request is coming and which content you want, and it will respond back with the content. So that will have some logic in that. So that logic will be written in the written through these languages. And next is the client side. So the client side is the browser, and which is which we are seeing. So here you so that when we enter google.com, it has rendered the response in our browser. So we got the content of that as HTML, right? Here you can see that when we send a request and its response was an HTML and all the stuff, the browser has rendered that HTML to the web page. And so these are the client side languages: HTML, CSS and JavaScript. So HTML is used for the structure of the web page, like where you want a heading. If you want a heading, you can put a HTML tag there and you can type that heading, h1 tag. And next is the CSS. If you want to give some color, some styles to that HTML page, you can give CSS. And for JavaScript is used for dynamic actions, such as when we click a button, if you want to do something in the client side itself, we can use JavaScript. And the client side logic, there are many things like clicking a button, when we move cursor, when we refresh it, or something like that. So next we are going to talk about Uniform Resource Locator, or URL. So we saw that if we want to get a content from a web server with our browser, we have to enter a URL. Then the browser will make a request to that URL, request with that URL to the server, and we will get the content. So we are going to talk about what that URL and how it's structured is. Here you can see the first part of the URL is HTTP, which we said that it is a protocol used. So for web communications we use HTTP protocol. You can identify that with the colon and the double slash separator. And next thing is the domain part of the URL. So here you can see www.example.com. So that is the domain part of the URL, and this is the browser knows where to send the request, so it will send the request to this server. This is the domain of that URL we want to request, and this domain will be resolved to an IP, and the IP will be, we will be sending request to that IP. So you can see how we can resolve that IP by just a command line tool is there, dig example.com. So you can see that we will get the IP as this. So we will be sending the request to this IP. You don't have to worry about that, because DNS server will resolve that domain to an IP, and then that we will be sending request to that IP address. Next we are going to talk about the port part. Here you can see that after the example.com there is a colon and a number is given. So that part is known as the port. So the port which we want to send. Most common ports are 80 and 443. Here you can see the protocols was HTTP. So for HTTP we use 80 and HTTPS we use 443. So for these two protocols we don't have to give a port. The browser will know that if it's HTTP, then it will be sending the request to port 80, and HTTPS it will be sending to port 443. So we don't have to specify that explicitly, but if there is another web servers hosted in another port, we have to give the port explicitly, so that the browser will know where to send the request, which port to send the request. And next is the path part. here you can see path to my file.html. This is the content we want to get from the server. So we want to get the my file, so we just have to give the right path to the my file.html, and then it will fetch the content for us. If you give the wrong path, we will get the wrong data. And next is, here you can see a question mark. So after that question mark, what is coming is called query string or query parameters. So here it's a combination of key and a value pair, where a key equal to a value, and we can separate two parameters with an ampersand. Two parameter, this is the first parameter and this is the second parameter, key 1 and key 2. This will be something like if you want to request something where user, we can give key 1 as user equal to some username, and where you can the ID of the user equal to some ID. So like that we can send the request. These are called query parameters. Next is the anchor part. So here you can see an pound symbol. After that pound symbol, somewhere in the document is given. So what this means is, if we have an anchor tag in the document, which means an HTML anchor tag, it will point to that anchor tag. Okay, it will point to that anchor tag in the document. That's the symbol. So now I will show you an example for client side and server side languages. So here I have two files, index.html and index.php. So first I'll show you. So this is an HTML file. You know HTML is a client side language. So when we request this, we will get the page. So we can request that. It is stored in the localhost, so I can just give localhost. Localhost is a local domain, so we can host web pages in that also. So here we can see the welcome message. If you want to see the source of the web page, you can just right click and view the source, and you see that our HTML is reflected here. The HTML page that we give is reflected here. So the next I'm going to show is about server side language, which is PHP file. Here I have a index.php, so I can just, so this is an example for PHP. Okay, so it will echo this hello, and it will get the get variable from the URL. So we can give like /index.php to go to that file. So we are requesting the index.php, and it gives the response back as hello. And if we check the page source of this page, we don't see any PHP code here, because PHP is a server side language, and so you don't have the server will not send the PHP code, but it will send the response that we want from the PHP. Okay, so the response that we are sending is just echo hello. And there is also we can see a get parameter key. If it is set to something, it will echo that also. So we can set that a key parameter. You can set a key parameter like we have seen, key equal to some value, web. So here you can see our web is also echoed. So what we give in that key is also echoed in this web page. This is how server side and client side languages work.
So we are talking about important terminologies used in web security. So first we can look at inspect element. So it's a tool, it's one of the dev tools. So it's a tool that lets you view and edit the HTML and CSS of a web content. So we can see an example. So if we see this page, we can take the inspect element by pressing F12 or taking control and right click and inspect. So it will give us this inspect element. So here we can see all the HTML and here we can see all the CSS. So here we can see all the HTML that is not visible here, like the input tag and all, the button tag and all, and this script tag which is not visible here, we can see it here. And we can also see this HTML by right clicking and view page source. We can see all the HTML, but we can edit the HTML here. We can edit it only here, only in the inspect tab we can edit the HTML and all. So in the view page source we cannot edit the HTML. You can know more about the inspect element in the getting started section of the BIOS wiki. Then there is cookies. So a cookie is basically used to identify a user. It is set by the server. It is stored on the browser. So for every request, the cookie is sent along with the request, and it allows the server to identify which user is sending the request. So for an example, we can say the same site, and we can look at the storage. Here we have the cookies. So these cookies are sent along with every request, and we can it will allow the server to understand which user is sending the cookie, and we can also edit the cookies easily using the dev tools. You can also know more about cookies in the BIOS wiki cookies part. Then there is sessions. Sessions are also used to identify the users. It stores data about the users in the servers. The main difference between cookie and sessions are cookies are stored on the browser on the client side, while sessions are stored on the server side. So sessions are not easily manipulated, but cookies can be easily edited using the browser itself. Sessions are also used to identify a user. So then there is robots.txt. So it's a path of web pages. So it will allow web crawlers to know which paths are accessible and which paths are not. So it is basically communicate with the web crawlers and let the web crawlers know which path is accessible and which path is not. So we can see an example, like we go to google.com/robot.txt. We can see many paths which are allowed and disallowed. So these disallowed paths, the web crawlers cannot access. They can only access this allowed path. That's what this robot text is used for. Then there is HTTP methods. So HTTP methods are used to send requests. There are many methods. So these are a few: get, post, head, and options. So if we look at, you can see the request methods in the network tab. So if we just go to these are all the requests that's being sent, and we can see the method, their status and their domain and all using the network tab. So we can take focus on get and post methods as of now. So like in the get request, the values are sent in the URL itself. So it is used to say send data, and the data is sent in the URL itself as a value. So if we search something in it, so like these values, if we look at these values are sent in the URL itself. So that's what happening. So the values are sent in the URL itself in a get method. Then there is post method, where the value is sent in the request data. So like when we are logging in or something, we can just give the username and password in the URL, because it will be visible to everyone. So for secure transfer, so we use post method and it will send data in the request body. So we can see that like if we send any username and password and we can see that the method is post here and the data is sent as a request in the request body. If we see the request data will contain the data we sent. This is a basic request. So we told you that we can see it in the network tab. So we can take each request and see what each request is, or we can use a proxy. So each of these are requests sent to the server. So the proxy will intercept the request before it reaches the server, and we can edit it and all. So most common use proxy is burp suite. So we can like click this intercept, and if we send any username password, it will intercept the request. So this is the request that is going on, and here we have the data in the request body. Here we have the path. Here we have the method used. This is the post method. So this is the data we sent. This is the protocol that we use, that is HTTP, Hypertext Transfer Protocol. This is the path we are sending the request to. This is a post method. This is a post method, and like this is a get method. This is also a get method. Then there is HTTP headers. So there is a request header and a response headers. So we can look in the network tab, and if we click in the headers, there are response headers and request headers. So these are sent from the browser to the server, and these are from the server back to the browser. These are all the headers that are sent to the browser, and these are the ones that the server sends back. Then there is response codes. So response code that starts with 2 for 200 and all, that means the request was okay, the request was success. Then there is response code that starts with 3. It means it is redirecting us. So response code that starts with 3 means it is redirecting us. We can for example, like if we look at the look at this one here, the response code is 200. This is the response code. This is the request that we send, and this is the response that we get from the server. So here we get a 200 response. That means the request was okay. Then there is a response code that starts with 3. For example, 301. It means the it is redirecting us to another website. So we are using it is redirecting us to another website, and the there is this location header. So these are all the response headers, and this location header is used to say that which URL is it redirecting us to. Then there is a response codes that start with 4. That means some client side error has happened. So it means something this request is for example tells us that the page is not found. So we are sending a request to return a non-existent page, and it will send us a client error has occurred and this page is not found. Then there is a response code that would start with 5, which means a server side error has happened. So response code 4 states that a client side error, and response code that's with 5 says that there is a server side error.
Now we will be looking at some trivial web attacks that can lead to major after effects. Directory traversal. Directory traversal or path traversal refers to an attack through which an attacker may trick a web application into reading and subsequently leaking the contents of file outside of the document root directory of the web application. Directory traversal attacks typically manipulate web application inputs by using the .. sequence or similar variations to access server file system folders that are higher in the hierarchy than the web root folder. Typically, path traversal attacks are used to gain access to sensitive information stored within arbitrary files
in other areas of a web application or in other parts of the file system that the web server can read. Now I will demo a basic directory traversal challenge. In this challenge, there is an HTTP parameter called page which takes in file names as user input and it prints its content. So here we can try to give message.txt file, which is actually a file in the file system. Here you can see that it reads that file and prints its content here. Now we can try to use the // sequences to traverse through the directories and reach the root directory. Now I guess I reached the root directory, and now we can try to access the password file, which is actually a file that contains the list of system accounts. So here you can see that it actually reads the contents of the password file, and this is basically how the directory traversal attacks work. SOP or same origin policy. The same origin policy is basically a security mechanism that restricts how a document or script loaded by one origin can interact with resources such as content, headers and cookies from another origin. What is an origin? Origin basically includes protocol, domain and port in a URL. And two URLs are said to have the same origin if both of them have the same protocol, domain and port. And in these examples, we can see that the first and the second URLs have the same origin because both of them have the same protocol, that is HTTP, the same domain, that is www.example.com, and the same port 80. But in the third example, you can see that it's having the port as 81. So here the SOP will disallow this origin, that is www.example.com at port 81, to access resources from HTTP www.example.com at port 80. And in the fourth example, you can see that it's having a different protocol, that is HTTPS. So here also SOP will disallow this domain from accessing resources from HTTP www.example.com. And you can also see in the subsequent examples that they are of different origins because they are different domains. SQL injection. SQL is a standard language for accessing and manipulating databases. And SQL injection is a web application attack where attackers can execute malicious scripts that run in the backend and can steal the data from the backend databases. There are mainly two types of SQL injection: error-based injection and blind injection. The main difference between these two injections are, in error-based SQL injection, we can actually see the errors caused by our input. But in blind injection, we cannot see those errors. So now I will demo a basic error-based SQL injection challenge. So in this challenge, we can see that we can give a parameter called ID with a numeric value. So we can try that. We can give ID equals 2 and it will print our login name and password as Angelina and IQD. Now if we give it as 3, it will give our login name as dummy and our password as password. Now we can try to give some other inputs like a double quotes, and when we give a double quotes, you can see that it returns nothing. Now we can try to give a single quote. Now you can see that when we gave a single quote, an error pops up, and from this error you can see that it's an SQL syntax error, And also you can see the part of the backend SQL query in the error. So what basically is happening in the backend query is like this. So this is the SQL query that is passed to the database in the backend, and here you can see the query is like select star from users where ID equals our input and then limit 0,1, which we saw in the error message. And here you can see that our input, which is passed to the ID parameter, is directly passed into the SQL query inside the single quote, and because of this we have control over the query after this part where our input is inserted. So when we gave the single quotes as our input, since here there is an extra single quote, it caused an SQL syntax error. So we can try basic SQL payloads here, like if we give something like or 1 equals 1, a single a semicolon and a hashtag. So here what happens is like the query will be like select star from users where ID equals nothing or 1 equals 1. So this is a globally true statement. So so what happens here actually is it will select everything, every column from the database, from the users table where ID is equal to empty. So this part will be false, but since there is an OR, if either of these are true, this query will be executed, and since the other part 1 equal to 1 is true, this will be executed, and this semicolon marks the end of this SQL query, and this hashtag, which is actually like a character used to comment in SQL. So everything after this character will be ignored. So if we pass this as our input, so here we have to URL and code this, you can see that it will print dump. This is because our query returned true and it actually executed. So and it worked. So we can exploit this further, like we can use something called the union keyword in SQL. This is used to join select statements and use like select ID from users, and like there is a function called group concat, which will actually concat all the columns into a single row. So we can try this as our input. And you can see there is an error called select statements have a different number of columns. This is actually because the first select statement prints, like for example, like 3 columns, and our second select statements only prints just 1 column. And for union keyword to work, both the select statements should have the same number of columns. So we can try like giving like more number of columns, like we gave some dummy columns like 2, 3, 2 and 3, and this will actually work. So we can try this payload. And here you can see print 2 and 3. Since it's printing 2 and 3 and not our ID, we can try to place our ID in the place of 2, like and then 3. Now if we try this payload, you can see it prints all the IDs, and from this we can try to print all the usernames, and you can see it printed all the usernames. And now we can also try to print all the passwords, and it printed all the passwords. So this is basically how SQL injection attacks work. And moving on, local file inclusion. So in local file inclusion, it is a vulnerability where attackers can include files in the server through image upload or some other upload functionalities. And once the file is uploaded without proper sanitization, the attacker may upload some files which will be executed, and it may lead to attacker getting unauthorized access over the server. XSS. So XSS enables attackers to inject client-side script into web pages viewed by other users. An XSS vulnerability can be used by attackers to bypass access controls such as the same origin policy we discussed before. And there are mainly 3 types of accesses. Stored accesses, which arises when an application receives data from an untrusted source and includes that data within all its later HTTP responses in an unsafe way. And reflected accesses, which is the simplest variety of accesses, and it arises when an application receives data in an HTTP request and includes the data within the immediate response in an unsafe way. And DOM-based accesses arises when an application contains some client-side JavaScript that processes data from an untrusted source in an unsafe way, usually by writing data back into the document object model. So now I will demo a reflected and stored access challenge. So this is a reflected access challenge. Here if we give something and press the search button, you can see it will print like a message saying sorry, no results were found for our input. So like if we give something else, and will be shown like no results were found for our input. So here we can see that our inputs is basically reflected here in this page. So we can try to inject some HTML elements into this. Like we can try to inject the h1 element, and you can see that it actually works. Like it will inject this element into this website. So now we can try to add the script element which using which we can execute JavaScript. So we can try to make an alert window with the domain of this page. So you can see that it works, and it prints the domain accessgame.fspot.com. This is basically how the reflected access attacks work. So here in this you can see how our tags are injected into this page. Like you can see our script alert document in this. Yeah. Moving on, this is an example of a stored access challenge. Here this is a chat service, and we can give some input here and press share status, and it will be put here. And when we refresh the page, we will load all these chats again, and all our like inputs will be stored here. Yeah, and here like we can try our regular XSS payload like script alert and then script tag to close it. And when we do that, it does nothing. It's actually because it blacklists this script tag, thinking it's a common tag, so it it's mostly blacklisted. So we can try another way to cause XSS using the image tag, and in the image tag we can specify JavaScript in the on error attribute. So in this on error attribute we can specify this JavaScript code to trigger a alert box, and we can paste this, and here you can see that it actually triggers the alert. And what's interesting about this is this payload here is stored in this page, and whenever we refresh the page you can see our payload gets executed. And whenever someone else visit this page, this script will be executed in their browser too. So this is basically how stored XSS work. Now moving on to SSRF. So SSRF or server-side request forgery is a vulnerability that allows an attacker to induce the server-side application to make HTTP requests to an arbitrary domain of the attacker's choosing. In a typical SSRF attack, the attacker might cause the server to make connection to internal services within the organization's infrastructure. A successful SSRF attack can often result in unauthorized actions or access to data within the organization, either in vulnerable application itself or on other backend system that the application can communicate with. And I will demo a basic SSRF attack. So this is the baby SSRF challenge from the Initiative of Mock Challenges. So in this challenge there is a parameter called URL, and whatever URL we pass to this parameter, the server will actually send a request, and since this is an SSRF payload, we can actually try a basic SSRF payload here. And since it's mentioned that the flag is the flag.php file, we can try to access the flag.php file in our payload. So you guys must be wondering what this localhost is. So this localhost basically means our own computer. Like if we visit a localhost in our browser, it will actually take us to our Apache root directory. Like if we give just localhost, it actually visits port 80 by default, and port 80 is where the Apache service is running. So here when we pass this URL http localhost flag.php to the server, the server will actually send a request to this URL, but now this localhost will point to the server itself and to the flag.php file. So the server is when it is sending the request, it's actually sending the request to the flag.php in the server itself. and that's how we get the flag for this challenge. And that's all. So that's all for this session. If you guys have any queries, you guys can ping us on our INCETF Discord server or directly DM us. Thank you.